You and I talked about this Johnny Manziel show, and I was very disappointed they didn't get into why he slipped off the face of the earth, and he didn't look at himself. It wasn't introspective at all. But now you've got another one coming out about Florida and their group that won a couple of national titles with Chris Leak at the helm for one, Tim Tebow playing an ancillary part, and then Tim Tebow winning one. I want to see how deep this Netflix thing goes because they had a future murderer on their team.
Maybe not future, by the way.
Yeah, it may have already done it. And they had a coach that, listen, you rarely hear me just say I have no respect for somebody, but I have no respect for Urban Meyer. You know, Jeremy Fowler, who's on covers the NFL now, he got berated by Urban Meyer. I don't remember if you remember that clip. And it was just an opportunity for him to try to make Jeremy Fowler look stupid in front of other reporters. And he knew the cameras were rolling, and it was pitiful. It was absolutely pitiful. And the way he would treat a young man who was covering a program that there's an awful lot of coverage. I hope it goes deep into the problems that Florida has because I'm interested, not because I wish ill will on Florida. But if they don't have a Tim Tebow, who has proven over time, he is the ultimate in faith. He hasn't even slipped up once. Everybody slips up once, basically, except for LeBron and Tim Tebow are the guys that project a good image, and they haven't slipped up and gotten in trouble off the field. I remember one time somebody told me, that Tim Tebow, I already had a 6-pack of beer in his hotel room. Well, I don't know that's true. But even if he did, if that's the worst
thing. That's not slipping up.
I know if that's the worst thing you do in life, I think that's pretty darn good. How deep do you think this thing will go? Because that was a group of a bunch of thugs.
I hope it goes really deep too. I want to give a little context, and Dave, I want to throw it back to you afterwards because I want you to tell me what you were covering. You were covering Tennessee, but you're obviously covering the SEC, so you probably knew a lot of things going on during that era. Just for context, guys, Urban Meyer is hired in 2005. That's a significant year related to Tennessee because that is the year, as Dave knows, that Fulmer finally lost complete control of the program because he let so many things slide from a discipline perspective. So much so that the University of Florida community created the Fulmer Cup. That was created by Florida fans, which, for those who don't know, the Fulmer Cup is given annually to the team with the most arrests every year. And it's named after Philip Fulmer, was created by Florida fans, ironically, the year Urban Meyer got to Florida. 3 years later, 4 years later, I've seen coaches lose discipline. Don't get me wrong. Kirby Smart's having trouble with it. Jimbo Fisher had trouble with it at Florida State. I've never seen a coach openly thumb his nose at the national media the way Urban Meyer did, saying, I don't care what you guys think I should do. I will never forget, we know Aaron Hernandez, we know Cam Newton. I'll never forget Brandon Spikes, Florida playing Georgia in 2009. And Brandon Spikes stuck his hand into a Georgia running back's helmet and tried to gouge his eyes out. Literally tried to gouge his eyes out. Urban Meyer came up and said, I'll suspend him for a half for the next week. Just blatant thumbing his nose at everything. And I'm not here to defend Will Muschamp as a head coach, but I will say that when he took over Florida, he took over, Dave, you know this, a complete disaster. And I think it was so bad that I think parents of recruits were steering their kids away from that school because it was so notoriously bad. Similar to what happened in Miami, by the way, where they had a lot of trouble. That's why they still have trouble coming back. I think a lot of parents, even in the inner city of Miami, are like, I don't know if I want my kid to go into that school. I don't want them in that culture.
Before the interweb and social media blew up and we knew everything about everybody, I'm curious if you even know this story. Do you remember a Ronnie Wilson?
I do not, actually.
Okay, so this is just one of the dudes. This is not Aaron Hernandez, who ended up killing possibly multiple people. This is just a dude. So I'm reading from Andy Staples. This is back in 2008. And this is the type of thing that got swept under the rug. So he's meeting with a Gator club in 2005 and 2006. It said that when it comes to intelligent, excellent character, and athletically gifted young men, it'll be the top 1% of 1%. Athletically, he might have been right. But how about this? In April 2007, Ronnie Wilson was a redshirt sophomore offensive guard from Pompano Beach, Florida. He was going to be a starter. He was nasty, a little too nasty. It manifested itself on the field. And then early in the morning of April 5th, according to a Gainesville police report, this Wilson cat, who's huge, he's an offensive lineman, 6'4", 315 pounds, decided it would be a good idea to punch an average man and then spit on him. That's pretty bad enough, right? That's you're suspended for multiple games, not just a game, none of that, correct? Would you agree with that?
You're suspended for multiple games. Absolutely.
Okay, it gets way worse. He should have been kicked off the team. Fuller jumped in his car, the person who was punched, and followed Wilson, staying on the line with 911 so police would know where to find Wilson. About 20 minutes later, according to the report, Wilson's plea and a 911 call, both cars stopped in an empty parking lot. Wilson pulled out a blank from his trunk. What is the blank? What would you think is the blank?
I cheated. I Googled, but
okay. The blank was an AK-47. I'm fine with people having guns, but why does a high school player in Gainesville, Florida, a small area, need an AK-47? How does he even afford it before NIL? I don't know. Fuller ducked beneath the steering wheel. Wilson pointed to the sky and fired. And I literally remember listening to the audio and how scared this guy was. 16 months later, Wilson's back on the field as a walk-on defensive lineman. And he got chance after chance after chance. And he had an AK-47 and fired it into the air. What kind of an idiot does that? And this is just one of the idiots that was on that football team. This doesn't have to revolve around Aaron Hernandez, guys. This revolves around the entire culture of the program. Aaron Hernandez just happened to take it a step further. And they did everything they could to make sure that everybody was available for the biggest game. Now, Steve Spurrier kind of did this, but the transgressions weren't as serious. They did everything to make sure that the players were ready for the biggest games, and that was usually Tennessee, because they would play two okay teams to start the season that were like preseason games. So Urban Meyer, a lot of coaches are like this. He's not the only one. Urban Meyer he pushed it to the limit of how hard he could keep those players on. Remember Nick Saban early on kicked linebacker Jimmy Johns off the team for dealing cocaine in the parking lot of the Alabama football complex. So a lot of coaches do this, but you don't have to be successful. You don't have to do this to be successful. Caleb, this was a really bad group that I think affected, much like Tennessee struggled on the field for a decade. I think that group, like you alluded to, is very insightful. I think it affected Florida football recruiting for about a decade.
Yeah, I do. And you were insightful to me about USC and just the culture of Compton in the 80s. Parents want Bobby Bowden had a great statement one time, because a lot of these kids come from rough backgrounds with parents who are, who do a lot of bad things. But Bobby Bowden always said, even if your parent is even if you're a bad person, these parents don't want their kids to be bad people. They want their kids to be good people. And so they'll still try to steer their kids to the right situation. Urban Meyer, he hid so much behind Tim Tebow. I mean, they trotted out Tim Tebow to provide cover for the program so much. And it honestly, to me, if there is a stain on Tim Tebow's legacy, it's that he covered for everybody doing everything at Florida during that time.
I can't put that on Tebow, though.
I can't either. That's true.
Had he done one little thing, like had he gotten a DUI or something like that, or anything since his time at Florida, I would say, yeah, he was probably a part of the problem. But I can't put anything on Tebow, man. I mean, I don't
think he was part of the problem, but I don't know. Maybe speak up about what one of your players did was unacceptable. What one of your teammates did was unacceptable. If you're this much of a golden boy, maybe say my teammate Brandon Spikes should not be trying to blind people when he's playing.
Okay, yeah, but a golden boy also lets the coach handle that. So I can't put anything. Maybe you put a little bit
The
on Tebow.
quarterback, not when you're the quarterback.
I think in
I mean,
college, you let the head coach handle that.
I just felt like Peyton Manning always had command in college and the NFL of his team. Did you not? Like, always Peyton Manning was the one who had command of his team. And I've always felt that Florida hid behind the religiosity of Tim Tebow, and oftentimes people who make that much of a public spectacle and hide behind the religiosity of something, there's something going on beneath them. Look at Hugh Freeze, who is the most outspoken Christian coach there is in the SEC and would tweet Bible verses, and darn near got Jonathan Congo to commit to Ole Miss because of how Christian he was. And we find out he's out here ordering hookers. And I don't believe him that they were for himself. I'm just going to say that much.
Oh,
But
yeah, I know. Oh, that they were for recruits? Well, either one's
I think they were for. I think they may have been for underage recruits.
Okay, well, that may be. I don't know that, and I haven't heard that reported, but certainly with the number of escorts he was calling, it wouldn't be a surprise. But I'm going to defend for a second again, and it's kind of gaining a little momentum on the message board. I'm going to defend Tim Tebow. He hasn't done anything to this point to me that has besmirched his image, but he is the one guy on that football team, maybe that's been like that, and he is also a guy that I wouldn't expect in college as the quarterback to say something. If it's the NFL, I got you. So maybe you and I differ on that a little bit. But at the end of the day, I hope this Netflix series goes deep into it. And if it's just like the Johnny Manziel thing, then I'm going to regret my time spent watching it because they didn't go into the steps of Johnny Manziel's slide. It was like that was an hour. I don't remember how long it was. That was an hour-long program, and like 50 minutes of it was how great he was and the impact he had, and then 10 minutes. Oh, I messed up. Sorry. I want to hear why you messed up.
Let's tell the story of 2009 with Florida real quick, because you remember they win their second national title in 2008. Thugs and criminals all on the team. It really comes to a head in 2009 where it's kind of like Georgia last year. They're number one the whole year. They're squeaking by in games because they're just loaded with thugs and criminals, and that's the Brandon Spikes, Chris Rainey, all the Ronnie Wilson's back on the team that year. I think in 2009, and it's every week. That was they barely beat Tennessee. They and they get to the SEC title game, and they are again they are the worst behaved team in the SEC. They go play Alabama. Nick Saban, they had beaten Alabama the year before. Nick Saban's recruiting classes have finally taken shape. And I remember watching that game on the field, Dave. Florida acted like bad boys all year, and they did not look in the same class as Alabama in terms of toughness. And Alabama beat the brakes off them. There's an Alabama player. I don't want to call him out because I think I know who it is, but I could be wrong. But he laid a hit on Brandon Spikes, and Brandon Spikes limped the rest of the game. And Alabama was kind of like, do you remember the replacements, that moment where they all take the 15-yard penalties because they drop kick everybody in front of them? And
you're saying he was disingenuous, that he wasn't really hurt? Is that what you're?
No. I'm saying Alabama it was almost like the Batman taking out the villain of the SEC moment. They were like, we're going to give Florida a taste of their own tough medicine, and we're going to hit them, and we're going to make them hurt. And you watch that game realizing that Florida was on its way out and that Alabama's dynasty was here. And you also watch that game realize, and then what did Urban Meyer do? He faked an illness and retired.
Yeah, I covered that game. Afterwards, he looked like he was ill, and blamed it on esophageal spasms, which actually I have had. And oftentimes it's brought on by an anxiety attack, sometimes not. But I think that was it. The health issues weren't. I mean,
no
mental health issues. I know nowadays that we look at mental health issues as they are significant, and they are. The mental health issue was Nick Saban just beat the hell out of me, and he's going to continue to beat the hell out of me. That was the mental health issue. I've lost. It's like Rocky 3 when he's getting ready to fight Mr. T. When he screams on the beach, I'm scared. That's practically what Urban Meyer did at the press conference after that SEC championship game. John Adams was with me, and John looked at me, and he goes, this is before we knew anything about health. John goes, he doesn't look right. And he didn't. Mm-hmm. And it was because that confidence had suddenly been shattered. And I think he knew at the end of the day that without that confidence, without winning at a high level, he wasn't going to have a pass for having a team full of thugs. And it
And
all intertwined. And he was like, I got to get out of here.
and he was humiliated in that loss because they did rub it in everybody's face. They acted like the 95 Cowboys, Dave. You know this from the 90. Remember the 95 Cowboys was like, we're thugs and we're jerks, but we'll beat you on the field, so it doesn't matter. Florida carried themselves that way. And then when Alabama did that, it was, oh, and by the way, I want to point this out 4 years later when the Jameis Winston stuff happened in 2013, 2014, Urban Meyer went on Bill O'Reilly and said, it'd be really hard for me to accept a player like Jameis Winston on my team. He said that.
Okay. Whatever. Okay. We'll see. I don't know if they're going to go into it deep or not. I hope so.